What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Tape. TJ Wingard here with you to give you my updated 2026 wide receiver rankings. I'm giving you names 16 all the way up to 1. And before we get into 16, I'll give you another 5 names really as honorable mentions. So we've got a lot of pass catchers to talk about. And man, we are less than a month away from the NFL draft. So after this, I'm going to be putting out updated, offensive position rankings. That'll be tight end, offensive tackles, interior offensive line, and then we'll do a video for updated defensive position rankings. I wish I had time for a little bit more of these isolated videos, but ultimately, just kind of ran out of time. But want to make sure you guys have an updated look at that. Of course, we'll do a dedicated video to my big board too. My top 100 is live at 32beatwriters.com. So if you want to take a quick look at it, it is up and live and updated. So that, and then we're going to be doing a team 7-round mock draft series. Again, I wish I could have done one video per team, but we're going to do that by division, and that will be coming out with the first video this weekend. So I'm going to go ahead and kickstart that 7-round mock draft series. And of course, we still have a few more guests and a couple of big ones next week for the mock draft collab series. So tons of draft content still on the way. We're less than a month away from the NFL draft getting underway. So much still to come here on 32Beat Writers. Great time to become a subscriber, both to our YouTube channel, but also to our website, 32beatwriters.com. But with all the, the sales spiel out of the way, let's start off with wide receiver number 16. And really, before we start talking about Elijah Seratt, let me give you my 5 honorable mentions and a couple of quick thoughts. Really, I'll make it 6. Wide receiver 22 for me, Bryce Lance. Love him on the vertical plane. Think he's a little stiff in the hips. Think there's going to be some expansion of that route tree. But if you need a guy 4th round to develop as a vertical, field stretching, big body guy, work on the, boundary, Bryce Lance is worth that shot in the dark on day 3. Number 21, Kevin Coleman Jr. 4-school guy in 4 years. That scares me a little bit, but love what I saw at the Senior Bowl. And he is a NFL-ready slot receiver when it comes to like his suddenness as a route runner, his shiftiness after the catch, and also 5'11", 180. Again, just kind of prototypical, kind of slot-only size. But nonetheless, like on day 3, if you're willing to take a shot on the personality, I think you could be getting a guy who's a pretty instant contributor, to be honest, especially considering the draft slot. Wide receiver 20 is Jacoby Lane from USC, 6'4", 195. Junior. Was a little surprised to see him come out. Fluid, you'll hear me say this a couple times in this video. Fluid big body receiver. I'm not really sure about explosive, to be completely honest with you, but moves well carrying his size and his weight, and has the ability to make some really crazy contested grabs, both like working back to the football and working the vertical play and getting down the field. So younger prospect. I think he still has a shot to go top 100, but to be completely honest, his stock's dinged pretty heavily. And there were some nice moments at the Senior Bowl, but on the whole, especially in the team drills, that felt like a disappointing week, and maybe that's pushed him slightly outside the top 100. Wide receiver 19, Deion Burks from Oklahoma. Slot-only guy. Love the explosiveness. I really like a lot of what he brings to the table. Think you need to expand his route tree. Really, his route tree just kind of had to fit with what they could do, especially post-hand injury. John Mateer, that offensive, that passing game for that offense just kind of wasn't really what it was pre, hand injury. And of course, your quarterback has a broken hand. That's going to change how you run that offense. But to no surprise, Mateer, his best game post-injury was the college football playoff game against Bama, and it coincides with Deion Burks having 7 grams for like 100 yards. So, I do think at the slot, at the next level, it's going to be a different ask for the route tree than what he did at college. But nonetheless, I love how this guy moves. So a little bit of a projection, but again, top of the 4th round, I'd be interested to get Deion Burks on my squad. Wide receiver number 18, Zachariah Branch. I'm just not the world's biggest Zachariah Branch guy. I understand the way he moves is special, right? 5'10", 180, total jitterbug, yards after the catch, but more than 50% of his targets came behind the line of scrimmage, at or behind the line of scrimmage. Even when you do get to see him work down the field, I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done for his route running and the overall, how many steps you're taking, right? Setting up defenders, head and shoulder fakes, things like that. So right now he's an interesting gadget player, slot potential, just because of the way he moves. And a lot of his routes, to be completely honest with you, are option routes within 9 yards from the line of scrimmage. So he's kind of a little Kadarius Toney for me. And that I'll be completely honest, that scares me. But he also does bring a lot of special teams value. So I'm interested to see what he does from that standpoint at the next level. And then the last guy I want to throw into the honorable mention tier is my guy, Eric Rivers. I have been a fan of Eric Rivers pretty much this entire draft cycle. Was a, lifeline of that FIU offense, transfers to Georgia Tech. In a lot of ways, I think he played the Eric Singleton role better than Eric Singleton, but that's a run-heavy offense, so there's only so many opportunities to go around, and he's 175 pounds, so he may well be a slot-only guy unless we could add 10 maybe you can get up 15 pounds muscle, but I don't know. The dude flies. The guy is an absolute, he brings that to the table, like this featherweight status where he's a little bit lighter. You don't want him obviously going against press, but like the dude can fly. And I think he's a sharp route runner too, explosive in and out of his breaks, sure-handed too. So I look at him as like, you're looking for receiver 3. I think you have a potential to draft this guy day 3, develop him into that, kind of like almost what Jalen Naylor's kind of been for the Vikings. But like, especially if you're a team that runs those deep over routes, right? The 49ers could use another receiver. Like I kind of thought about him as that type of fit, that type of an offense, right? The Dolphins going through this huge overhaul in their wide receiver room. Could Rivers be one of 2 guys they bring in? Maybe they take an early swing of the bat and they draft a guy on day 3 like an Eric Rivers who just kind of can fit in with what Bobby Slowick, assuming it looks similar to what it was in Houston, could do some of the similar things there. Maybe, the Chargers aren't done adding that wide receiver room with Mike McDaniel, another Shanahan disciple guy. I think there would be a really interesting fit to be had there, but love the athlete. He's potentially a slot only, but maybe we can add to his weight, have him play on the outside and be a little bit of a Z slot type of player. But with all that said and done, those are the, 6 honorable mentions I want to talk about. Let's talk about Elijah Seratt. And you can tell, like, all those guys I said, like, 4th round. Bryce Lance, I can understand if you, 5th round, you don't love him in the 4th, you take him in the 5th. To me, once you get to day 3, it's like, especially in this class, like, just take your guy. So I'm kind of projecting he'll go 4th round. This is also a good receiver class. So I think once they start flying, they're going to fly. But I can see a world where Lance is a 5th round guy instead of a 4th. But that being said, all those guys I think are, like, worth filling a role within a wide receiver room with a shot in the dark, taking that selection on day 3. And now we get to the 3rd round. And Seratt, to be completely honest, would be like mid 3rd round to late 3rd round. But I didn't want to add those additional little pieces in here just to not clutter up the screen too much. And then we're really getting into like these little bit of differences between these guys. But generally, all 16 guys I'm talking about today, I'd be comfortable taking in the top 100. And Seratt, like, again, it's a flavor. This is not your do-it-all, game-breaking, alpha, number 1, anything like that. You are drafting him to be kind of a James Jones type. Corey Kinnan from Daft on Draft has been using that comp, and to me, it's kind of the perfect comp. He is the master of late hands in this class, has great body control, specifically when working the sideline. He has all of that, what you think of as a traditional X-boundary wide receiver. Those are the skills that he brings to the table. And then he does fall forward with the balls in his hand, 6'2", 210. He's not elusive after the catch, but he's going to fall forward for another 2 to 3 yards. Kind of early on in this draft process, like Cortland Sutton was kind of the high-end comp. I don't know if he's really, like, you watch Sutton, he's like more explosive than people want to give him credit for around the similar size, 6'2", 210-ish. And he's also a pretty fluid mover, in open space over the middle of the field. I don't know if Seratt's really got that. And honestly, I think he's like Cortland Sutton missing a gear or 2. And that's really kind of the main drawbacks here. Like, doesn't have elite top end speed. Smooth route runner, yes. Explosive, I wouldn't call that. Like, you watch if he runs a dagger route, it doesn't look the same as like a Cortland Sutton or, really high end situation here. Like, it doesn't look the same as Nico Collins. So it's one of these guys where like he kind of plants that foot, tries to break to the inside, and DBs are pretty much with him stride for stride. A lot of his production comes with slants, hitches, and then those back shoulder throws from Mendoza. So we're talking about, an underneath possession style, sure-handed X receiver. Honestly, like, you hear sacrificial X, Elijah Seratt totally checks that box. Below average quicks when it comes to getting off the line of scrimmage. That's the one side of, if him being a sacrificial X, he's got to get better against press. Right now, he's just trying to out physical, out body, maybe show you outside, then run that slant inside. But right now, there's just not a whole lot of nuance. And it's because, like, again, majority of his routes are 3 routes: slants, hitches, and those back shoulder throws. So still a lot of work to be done when it comes to like who he is at the line of scrimmage. Could we, speed train this guy, get him a little bit more explosive in the short area? Maybe. But at this point, for the most part, you are who you are. But really, the last thing I wanted to note here for Elijah Seratt, one of the reasons, like, again, I take a shot on him in the top 100. I'm a sucker for a guy that does these kind of steps up in competition, and their level of play goes up with it. St. Francis to JMU to Indiana, like I said with Kevin Coleman, where it's like, sometimes 4 schools, 4 years, that can be a little scary. Bear Alexander, guy in next year's class, where it's like, he's played a lot of Power 4 programs. Like, why isn't he sticking anywhere? That's interesting. Seratt, it's like a clear jump in competition. It's a clear line of delineation of him moving in the right direction. And I think that's only going to continue once we get to the next level too. So just a guy who's been a grinder, feels like a very coachable player on top of that. So fits within a specific role. And if you look at like James Jones stats, again, Corey Kinnan, like I already hit on this on Daft on Draft, but 800-ish yards a year where he had double-digit touchdowns. Like, I think all that is possible. You're not drafting Seratt to be your next 1,500 yards. Like, this guy's going to change your offense. So we're kind of using that specialized role as an example. Like, 2 teams that I really love as fits for this guy. the New York Jets, right? Like you have Garrett Wilson, could see them maybe draft another receiver, but especially at 16, if it's like Mekhi Lemon, right? Like you're talking about Wilson as a Z, Lemon as a slot. So like if they could double dip at the position, get Seratt to be that X, I love that. Or the Vegas Raiders, right? Like Deontay Thornton can run some wind spreads. He could be your X, but not really my favorite guy for that. But then Jack Bash, really like him as a Z. Like my draft comp for him was Jacoby Myers, not an X, more of a Z. Love that. And they have like a guy like a Trey Tucker who can be, a useful third, another field stretching type. So like those are two teams that I think situationally really match up with what I think Seratt brings to the table. All right, number 15, let's go Brennan Thompson. Obviously a smaller guy, 5'9", 164. So let's start with the drawbacks here for Brennan Thompson. For a guy who is, I guess really starting with the draw here, he's the fastest player in this class to me. That being said, you look at 164, fastest player in the class, you would think this guy is going to be absolute nails after the catch. Like that's absolutely one of the things he brings to the table. And to be completely honest with you, that is really one of the most disappointing things about his profile. He's just not really this insane yards after the catch type of weapon that you would think, given the profile. And on that point, only 7 missed tackles forced last year, 12 over the last 2 years. So he looks like you fit a certain archetype, but not really totally there within his play style. Rounds off a lot of routes, and it's tough. Like the route tree and really what they kind of ask him to do at Mississippi State. A lot of it is like just go be fast and vertical, and then you get the occasional slant. He's an instant accelerator. There's a lot to like there, but when it comes to like the more nuanced routes, a lot of them are rounded off, which is a little frustrating again, given how explosive and linearly explosive, I should say, Brennan Thompson is. Ball tracking isn't awesome, which is also another one of these things where it's like, dude, you run a 4.26, like, and he doesn't really adjust to things off of his frame, right? Like specifically, if like it's a slant, and the ball slightly behind him, the rep's kind of done at that point. So, and part of that's just, 5'9", doesn't have an insane wingspan. So there's only so much you could really do with that when it comes to like adjusting off your frame when you are this size. But like, he's just not gonna be one of those guys. And then I thought deep down the field, and this is tough too. Like sometimes when you see a deep ball and it looks like, oh my God, what a dot from a quarterback. Really, it's a great late adjustment from a receiver. And then when you see like a true all 22 look, you'll see it was really the receiver. It kind of broke off, found that separation. The ball was actually leading him somewhere else. And then there's sometimes where like it's just an abysmal throw. The receiver has no shot in locating it. So I do think there's some instances where I looked at it and I couldn't fully, is this on Thompson? Is this on the quarterback? That being said, Mississippi State quarterback play last year was not great. So I do think at the next level, there is reasonable assumption to expect the ball tracking might look a little bit better, considering if he goes to a somewhat respectable offense with a somewhat respectable quarterback, that level of play should take him in the right direction. But let's get to the draws. Of course, fastest player in the draft, played mostly outside in college. And that's like one of those things that I really dug about Tank Dell. You look at the body type and you say, probably a slot. And Casey Concepcion, another one of these guys where you look at him and you're like, probably a slot. But Thompson played a majority of his snaps outside. And I love that because it forced the defense to do one of two things. One, by playing outside, like you just, and it's shades of Tyreek Hill too. Like when he was with the Chiefs and with the Dolphins, playing at the peak of his powers, you can't play man coverage against that. If that's on the outside, you just, at least not without safety coverage over the top. But, in like Miami's situation, you also have to deal with Waddle, so like this guy has another burner on the field. You're not going to be able to play man coverage against him and then not leave that other burner, on an island by himself. And then kind of off of that, like, it's a gamble to press this dude. You would say, 5'9", 164, doesn't have great arm length. Like, go get this guy at the line of scrimmage. But if you whiff, I mean, that's 6 points on the board. And it's the same thing I said about Tank Dell. Like, Tank Dell definitely has better release packages than Brennan Thompson. Again, like Thompson is like, there's work to be done with the route running. There's work to be done at the line of scrimmage work. Tank Dell was a guy with like refined release packages after like having 2 years of an insane amount of volume at Houston. So if you pressed him, it was like buyer beware. So Thompson's not quite there, but I will say if you press and you miss, like it's 6 points for Mississippi State or, in this case, whoever drafts Brennan Thompson. And then one other thing I want to put in the draw here, another one of these guys where like, is it the 49ers in the third round? I could see them liking Zachariah Branch, but maybe it's Brennan Thompson. Again, I think about these Shanahan offenses, these play action deep over routes where we've seen Brendan Ayuk just running away from a defense, right? I'm not saying Brennan Thompson's Brendan Ayuk or anything like that. Ayuk's definitely a better route runner. But like that type of stuff, and really, Quentin Johnston last year for the Chargers too. Play action, deep crosser. Sometimes, in Johnston's case, you're just bigger, faster than most people. Thompson may not be bigger than most people, but he's absolutely faster than 99% of the people he's gonna be playing football with. So those play action, deep crossers, you get the defense to bite. Like this guy's gonna be pulling away from DBs all the time. So I do think there's a specialized role, and I do wonder if the next level it is probably best for him to be in the slot. but there's still work to be done as a route runner too. So like, even that, like a lot of the separation you're going to need to see at the next level, if he's going to be in the slot, he's going to have to get better as a route runner. So I almost do wonder, is it Z getting this guy in motion at the snap, kind of the Mike McDaniel stuff he would do with Waddle and Hill, and then getting him on these kind of crossing routes where like you don't need to be a sharp, super savvy route runner. It's more so just like generally running in this direction, just be faster than the guy you're running away from. That sort of stuff might be at least the on ramp for someone like a Brennan Thompson. But 4.26 plays, and right, like there is potential there for him to develop into a potential game changer. Number 14, Dejon Stribling, 6'2", 207. Love the blocking of this type of guy, and also his frame. Like this is a boundary X wide receiver, both again with his like frame, but also his play style. Like this guy wants to build up speed down the field, wants to win on the vertical plane. And he's coming off the best year of his yards after the catch production. Not that he's like another one of these guys who's not like super insane after the catch, but I do think there's a little bit more wiggle than someone like an Elijah Seratt. And again, he has a tendency to be able to fall forward 2, 3, 4 yards after he is brought down. And again, solid blocker. Like part of the reason you're drafting this guy is because you're running tight set formations or you're looking for his impact in the run game. That's part of why I've been, I keep talking about San Francisco, like assuming Juwan Jennings is gone, or if there's a free agent or the team out there that liked Juwan Jennings as a free agent option, I can see a world where if they didn't get Jennings, they look at Stribling as a, backfill situation. Same thing with the 49ers. Like if they drafted Stribling to replace Juwan Jennings, I wouldn't be surprised in the least. Drawbacks, doesn't have an insane short area burst. It's another one of these guys where like the route tree is kind of slant hitches and then go work the vertical plane. So going to need to see some more, expansion of that route tree. But because of that, like, and I see the little stiffness in the hips, I'm like, once he gets to the next level and he's running a dagger to keep a DB honest, as opposed to just like a hitch, can he flip those hips open, make himself a presentable target? Because he's got the frame for that, but like, can he flip his hips and shake a DB and get that 2-3 yards of separation we need to get that pass over the middle of the field? Right now, I'm a little iffy on that. That's going to totally translate to the next level. He could be better at the catch point. He's this guy who wants to win on the vertical plane. I think he times his jumps, and I think the eyes are there. Like he sees the ball well. He's just got 42nd percentile arm length. So there's times where he goes to extend it, and, like if he's not totally stacking the DB perfectly, the DB's in the frame and it gets jarred loose. They get their hands on it. It becomes a, tussle down to the ground to who is going to come away with it. So that's just kind of an unfortunate body limitation because 6'2", 207, you want this guy going to take 50-50 chances, but 42nd percentile arm length might prohibit you. So ultimately, again, he's kind of the Sean McVay guy. We talked a lot about Shanahan, and again, he could totally be a Juwan Jennings replacement, but like those Sean McVay tight sets, his disciple, Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, like he could be an interesting Jalen Naylor, kind of replacement / like what's going to happen with Addison long-term. All that Zach Taylor, like if they really felt like they needed to replace Andre Yoshivas, probably not. But just throwing out a couple of these names where like it wouldn't shock me if these, McVay disciples took a shot on this guy for one, his blocking, his ability to play in line, and that in and of itself, right? Like I'm talking about him as an X receiver, but with these tight sets, he could become an interesting power slot. Like could he turn into a Jalen Coker type in a couple of years? I think that's possible too. So you do have some alignment versatility there with Dejon Stribling, but there's a lot of little things right. The really kind of negatives there, like how much can that hip stiffness, how much does that does it follow him around at the next level? Or is it something that, at the next level, I kind of forget I even wrote it down. And then the 42nd percentile arm length, that's just going to be something that kind of limits him from being like, an elite top end, true game changing wide receiver, in my estimation. Wide receiver 13, Skyler Bell, 5'11", 192. I think he could play Z, but probably best suited at the next level to be a slot. Savvy route runner, wins at all 3 levels, and UConn, they peppered this guy the football. And this is a little bit of, I mentioned Take Dell earlier. Like there's definitely some of that to be said here for Skyler Bell, talking about a year where 141 targets, 102 grabs. I tend to gravitate towards guys like that because it's the reps, right? Like me making this video, I'm better doing this stuff now than I was 5 years ago just because I've done reps, and I've done this before. Just like if you play baseball or if you play golf, like 5 years from now, you'll be better than you are right now. You are better right now than you were 5 years ago just because you've done it a lot more. Assuming, a little bit there. And Skyler Bell just had a metric ton of volume just shipped his way this last year at UConn. And it's also interesting, Wisconsin transfer to UConn, kind of a later breakout that makes me a little bit concerned, but also could just be one of these things where like, and especially with how he wins as a route runner, maybe it just kind of all came together there fully. And what I will say, like when he's at Wisconsin, it's, when was the last time we talked about Wisconsin as like this prolific passing attack? Only so much offense to go around there. And really the same thing for UConn too, until their quarterback this year was kind of a huge step forward, we'll say. So they finally had a guy that could air it out a little bit more, and Skyler Bell was the volume target because of all that. Really good body control and fast feet. Like, again, like there's some Tank Dell to this guy where it's like, yeah, sub 6 foot, but like his feet fire at the line of scrimmage. So press at your own, potential, peril, but also like getting off the line of scrimmage, getting on the toes of cornerbacks. Like his feet fire, he gets up on the the toes of cornerbacks really quick and presses them to try to flip their hips and turn and run with them down the field. And again, the body control, I think you see that especially in the intermediate to deep portions of the field when they're trying to target him there. He can get open, but also can make those acrobatic grabs, can work the sideline too, can go limp in the lower half and get those feet down. Really cleaned up the drops this last year. And that is something that's like, on one side, yes, he cleaned up the drops this year, but like there's probably a bigger discussion to be had. You see only a 3.8 drop rate this year. That being said, each of the last 3 seasons, so going back to 2023 at Wisconsin, 2024 at UConn, and if my memory holds, even another, okay. So really it's 2022 and 23 at Wisconsin, and then that first year at UConn in 2024. Drop rate north of 15 or 14% each of those 3 years, and the high being at 15.6%. So each of the 3 previous seasons, we had a little bit of a drop issue there with Skyler Bell. But this year, saw it drop precipitously. And it's interesting because of the volume and how that correlates to like keeping a guy in rhythm. It's, again, if you play basketball, you've been cold, you haven't taken a jump shot. Next thing you know, like we're 10 minutes into the second half, and now you're standing in the corner, the ball's coming your way, and you're expected to take the jump shot. You haven't done this all game. So like instincts take over for sure. But like at the same time, if that's your 8th corner 3 of the game, you're catching, firing, and shooting, and you're not thinking twice about it. So I almost wonder if the drops was an effect to the cause of more volume coming his way and just keeping him in the offense, keeping him in rhythm, right? Versus, again, going back to Wisconsin, like not really a whole lot of pass contacts we're pounding the table for and getting excited about talking about when it comes to that Wisconsin team. So I do think that's part of it, but also probably, he's got 10-inch hands. So I think just cleaning up a little bit of the clap catching I think I saw from 2024 at UConn. So just a little bit of the catching technique I think got cleaned up this year as well. And overall, really good athlete. I mean, you look at the mock draftable for this guy, and it's I thought he was a solid athlete. I was not expecting to come out of the combine talking about 95th percentile vertical at 41 inches, 95th percentile broad jump, 85th percentile 40 at 4.4 flat, a 65th percentile 10-yard split at 1.53. I just wasn't expecting that. I know he doesn't have the biggest frame, 48th percentile arm length, but that was kind of like the one thing from an RES standpoint where it's like, okay, that's not awesome. He's not great against press, getting into the drawbacks now. So Z slot, and it might be slot only depending on like who your play caller is, right? Again, I go back to the Mike McDaniel, the Bobby Slowicks, these guys who have used guys as the Z and get them in motion at the snap. I think in that case, you're totally fine with Skyler Bell as your Z, but he might end up being a slot only at the next level. Late breakout, also not the best level of competition. So there's a little bit of buyer beware there, but ultimately, like you don't get 102 catches in the season without being good. It's kind of the same thing I said, like Houston's always been one of those like, pass happy teams. And that probably inflated Tank Dell's numbers a little bit, but also like you don't have back-to-back 100 catch seasons without being good. So I'm not really as worried about it because volume to me is a little bit more indicative than like the level of competition sometimes, and not super elusive after the catch. Again, a great athlete, but like after the catch, that's not really where he's making his money. He's more so making his money, on the route running, right? Like getting open before the catch, and then he'll do enough after the catch. He pulls away from guys, but he's not like elusive. All right, wide receiver number 12, Antonio Williams. Now we're getting into our second round guys. And Skyler Bell, if the Rams hold on the pick at 61 and they haven't drafted a receiver there, I'm fine with taking Bell late 2. Like I could totally see where he fits in with what they want to do. So late 2 or late 3 really there for Bell. Antonio Williams, like mid to late second, I think it's totally fair for him. I think he's gotten lost in this process, to be completely honest with you. Summer scouting guy that for most people, he was a top 5, if not a top 3 receiver coming into the season. So smooth, short area route runner. That should say short area, not short round, but short area route runner. He cleaned up the drops a ton this year. And really his drops in 24 were more like he gets a lot of volume and he just lost concentration right there. Like he's open and he's just turning to run and that the ball's just dropping out. Not to make excuses for 8 drops. 8 drops is a lot, but he had a lot of volume. And I think he just, got a little too overconfident on some of those opportunities. Just one drop this last year in 2025. Did miss some time. So I understand where you might look at that and say, oh, well, he played less games. You can even just look at the drop rate for Antonio Williams. That also took a precipitous, drop, which is a good thing here for Antonio Williams. It was 8.7%, a year ago at Clemson. And then looking at this most recent season, drop rate at 1.8%. Excuse me, make that 9.6%. I thought it was 7.6%. 9.6% drop rate last year, 1.8 this year. So even with missing some time, the drop rate shows you that he cleaned him up. And then running back like vision after the catch, vision and cuts, and no, not cuts, and but vision and cuts after the catch. So that plus the special teams value, this guy yards after the catch, like he's gonna be able to pick up some extra yards, more elusive than a guy like a Skyler Bell or some of the other dudes we talked about, even more so than a Brendan Thompson, who we talked about at wide receiver 15. And the special teams value, this guy has been a punt returner for Clemson, and I do think that's definitely something you can ask him to do. To me, he is a slot-only player. I've comped him to Josh Downs. I had that since the summer, and to me, that's just like he's very much a Josh Downs slot receiver at the next level. Battled injuries in 23, 25. He's 187 pounds at the combine, so that kind of does signal like this is a body type that like, same thing with Josh Downs, right? If he misses 4 games in a given season, you're not terribly shocked, and there's probably a majority of seasons where he's missing 2 to 4 games. And it's just going to be something you kind of come to live with, unless he can add and get himself up to 195. Then I think I feel a little bit better about how that body's going to withstand all those hits and everything coming his way. Specifically, he's a slot player that's going to work the middle of the field. So, and then not much in the way of intermediate to deep route running, 7.7 ADOT. That is the second lowest of anybody we talked about today. The only player with a lower ADOT is, it's be interesting if anybody got it right, Zachariah Branch. Again, like I think he had 71 of his 93 targets last year, Branch that is, from 9 yards beyond the line of scrimmage or, less. And a majority of his targets came at or behind the line of scrimmage. So, only to be outdone by Branch here, that kind of signals to where like Antonio Williams is being run and being worked for this Clemson team. But I will say, like 3rd and 4, this guy runs the meanest 5-yard out that you'll ever see. Like teams know 3rd and short, that's where the ball's going. Like it's Cade Klubnik looking for Antonio Williams on the out route, and they just still can't cover it. So I will say what he is good at, he is very, very good at. You're just talking about, again, a very Josh Downs-like type of receiver. And to me, I'd be willing to take a shot on that somewhere like mid to late 2nd round, depending on my receiver room. Again, like if the Steelers did it at 53, and not that it's always fair, but I'm a Steelers fan, so I default back to my Steelers. If they made that pick at 53, maybe it's a little early for me, but as a slot guy to complement Pittman and DK, I can see the vision. All right, let's go on to wide receiver number 11 now. Malachi Fields, another 2nd round guy. The more I've watched, I kind of started as like, the Senior Bowl moved him from like early 4th round to like 3rd round guy to me. I could see a world where like late 2nd makes sense. And maybe I should have had Williams ahead of him because I could see Williams being a logical fit for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's kind of already got these, the big body guys on the outside, so that's not really a fit there. But that being said, a team in that vicinity, I'm trying to think about who's just ahead of like Pittsburgh. Like probably a little rich, but the Falcons at 48 could use an X receiver. The Dolphins are there in the early 40s, could use it. Like, it wouldn't be terribly shocking. It'd be a little rich for me, but it wouldn't be terribly shocking. But that being said, like what he does well, he does really, really well. Vice grips for hands and adjusts really well to off-body throws. Like this is one of those guys where like it's a natural just skill set he has to where like you can tell he's just practiced a ton, where like it almost feels like the juggling machines is probably not set up to point at his chest. He's almost exclusively trying to catch stuff off target because he is so good at it. Specifically the Pitt game. You look at the Pitt game for Notre Dame, like ton of these acrobatic off-body adjustment type of catches there. So, and that's kind of what you want out of an X receiver, especially if he does go to a team with a young quarterback. I can see a team that has that young quarterback, like if the Giants don't take a guy at 5, like they don't take Carnell Tate there, or they don't take a guy at 37, could they come around and maybe it's the 3rd round, get Malachi Fields at the top 3rd and be like, this guy, while like Jackson Dart is adjusting to a new offense, if there's off-body stuff, Malachi Fields is going to be kind of our answer to that. Could totally see that and understand that. Frame and play strength to play the X receiver spot. Solid blocker too. I think that's, again, kind of using the Giants. Harbaugh will buy into that through. And then constantly falls forward after the catch. Not one of these guys who's like super elusive or, going to make you miss after the catch, but 218 is a handful, man. And like this guy will absolutely fall forward. And that's where it's like, again, using the Giants, who's, Matt Nagy's going to use those RPOs. Like there's other routes that Fields runs well, but like if you throw this guy a hitch, he could turn a 5-yard grab into it's a 9-yard completion. Next thing you know, it's 2nd and 1, and you're moving the sticks pretty easily there. So absolutely think that's a part of Malachi Fields' skill set. The drawbacks 4.6 140, which is weird because he felt like, and I go back to watch the Senior Bowl stuff. I had been saying like I think he's got better straight line build up speed than people give him credit for, but I don't know how shifty he is. And then you get to the combine testing, and specifically that 163 10-yard split. Okay, I can kind of understand that. I don't think he's like the most short area explosive, but I thought there was a little bit better get off on the line of scrimmage. And really, he's a guy that like you get that down to just 158. All of a sudden, you're probably feeling better about mid 4.5 40 is like, yeah, okay, cool, that makes sense for someone who's 6'4". So that was a little interesting and not really what I was expecting coming out of seeing him at the Senior Bowl, watching him on tape, of course, before that. So the 10-yard split's not great, and I do think this is a guy that needs to get better against press. Right now, he's just trying to like out-muscle press corners. He's going to have to develop more nuance, be able to make lateral cuts at the line of scrimmage, fire his feet, be faster, just overall more quick, twitched at the line of scrimmage. And you can do some training for that, but ultimately what you got is what you got. So that part's a little disappointing. And he does need to develop a little bit more of a route tree. Mike Denbrock, like this is another one of these guys where, like, honestly, the same was true with Neighbors and BTJ when he was the OC at LSU. It's just you had Jaden and 2 first-round receivers, so you could get away with, goes, posts, and hitches. That was pretty much, really like hitches, comebacks, and goes. Like that was pretty much it. Especially like Neighbors, slot fades, and then like hitches, and that was kind of like the Neighbors route tree with Jaden, and then BTJ with it. And that's unfortunately kind of the Bo Collins coming out of Notre Dame last year, now a Giant. Malachi Fields, so actually I don't know if the draft Fields there, but new regime, who knows? But Malachi Fields, same sort of stuff, where it's like curls and goes and hitches, and that's kind of it. So it's like, but that being said, I don't see anything in the player that leads me to believe he can expand his route tree. It's just Notre Dame never asked him to. But that being said, it is going to be something you have to devote time to. So I did want to note that here. So it needs to get better against press. He's just not as good of an athlete and as explosive an athlete as I kind of had thought. And then we're going to have to expand that route tree. But what he does is an X, sacrificial X. Let him battle through press coverage. Like if you just have, like again, the Jets are another good example. You're trying to avoid Garrett Wilson battling through press. So just having a sacrificial X in and of itself brings a lot of value. And kind of shades of like what the Patriots did, bringing in Rome Odunze. Because I think they're looking at like Kyle Williams, like year 2 breakout. We want this guy to like have a huge year, but he can't play press coverage because he's just too thin. So we need a guy like Romeo Doubs to allow us to do that. So I think the same could be true here, depending on where Fields ends up going. All right, wide receiver 10. I'll go Ted Hurst. I'm just a little bit more intrigued by the athletic package that comes with Ted Hurst, both after the catch, but also down the field. So a big body X, 6'4", 206, that totally checks out to be an X receiver at the next level. Love the long speed. I also love his top of the route stems. Like when he's running deep routes, like he's that guy that will make that late adjustment to the ball or just a late break that opens him up to be a very friendly, target to our quarterback. So love his deep route running ability and ability to shake off the defender there. And then on top of the long speed, this guy runs some really nice comeback routes and hitches, like really fluid hip sync, and then deceleration ability. So I'm kind of bullish on that. And like those, now granted, level of competition is a big thing here. And that's a little bit of the drawback here. He's coming from Valdosta State, transferred to Georgia State. So, that's, comeback routes against those corners are going to look a lot different than comeback routes on Sundays, But that being said, like I still think the hip sync is there and the overall deceleration ability and athleticism needed is there. So he's got the long speed and the ability to like keep DBs honest by, again, having the ability to hip sync and decel. And then nice yards after the catch potential. And again, how much that is level competition, how much of it is how he moves. 18 missed tackles forced last year. That's an intriguing number. And what I will say is when we got to the Senior Bowl, got to see him, he won on those vertical stems. And I still saw the comeback deceleration ability there. He wasn't the guy. I don't think he was the guy who shook Colton Hood, but there was a rep, somebody ran it. I think it was actually Kevin Coleman Jr. So that makes sense. That's totally Kevin Coleman Jr.'s like skill set. But Hurst, I think, still showcased the ability to decelerate, hip sync, and get some separation against those types of guys. But I'll have to go back, honestly. It'd be interesting to see Hurst versus Hood if there was any routes like that. Because those are the routes that Hood struggles with, and I think those are the routes that Hurst runs well. And then ultimately, what I will say for the yards after the catch, like seeing him up close and personal, and at 206 when he was listed at like 190-something, he looked nice. Like he glides in the open field, looks really smooth with the ball in his hands. So like I saw him moving, and again, they're not doing full tackling at the Senior Bowl to avoid injuries, but you're seeing him move and, like set up would-be tacklers, and you're like, yeah, this guy could make some guys miss. No doubt about it. Drawbacks, 13 drops of the last 2 seasons. That's frustrating. Because level of competition, agnostic, like catch the football, homie. And really what I would say is like you're open more often than not against this level of competition. Really need you to see you catch the football then. Small school competition again. And I think you saw at the Senior Bowl, they're still work in progress, specifically opening his hips and running intermediate routes. Right now he's got the vertical stuff. He's got the comebacks off of it, but like opening his hips and running in the middle of the field, still some work in progress there, rounded routes there. So some of that's coaching, some of that's just getting away with it at that level of play. So that will need to be worked on at the next level. And then really as a run blocker, no. That's a big time work in progress for Ted Hurst. Wide receiver number 9, Chris Brassel, a similar type of guy. It's just, I think Hurst at this point has already added the weight, right? Like I think at Georgia State, he was listed at 194, 195. Brassel was kind of still at that weight. So kind of to get a snapshot of what I think Brassel does well, then I'll get into the player comp I'm like shooting for with Chris Brassel. But I like him in the second round, to be completely honest. Again, like the Falcons at 48, like I've drafted him to the Falcons at 48 multiple times, him and Ted Hurst, because I think they could use that X receiver, but that field stretching speed. So he got the long speed, 4.3, 740, and he's got long strides. So like not only does he have like the ability to fast fire feet, he's 6'4", so he eats up grass. So I think especially against like smaller corners, like this guy's going to blow by guys. Showcases really nice ability to hip sync. Everyone's looking at that, that route against Georgia, and I've talked about it multiple times. I think it's his second or third route in that game. Hip sync, 7 yards of separation, running an out route on the sideline, and he does that multiple times throughout the course of the season. So he's got that through and through, really, on his tape. And then a really nice catch radius, and he plays the boundary really well. And he's one of these guys who like can kind of go dead body, dead weight, lower half, get those 2 feet in on the sideline. And then another one of these guys where like the step up in competition. Yes, please, love these guys. Tulane, he was a good player there. Remember watching him when I was watching Michael Pratt. Goes to Tennessee. First year is rocky, for sure. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But specifically with drops, it was rocky first year. But then this year, had it all come together, took that step forward, and was that player that I think Tennessee expected to see when they got him in the portal out of Tulane. So I'll come back to the weight thing. Does have a history of drops. So you go back to, again, that first year at Tennessee, 2024-25, 17% drop rate. So we were talking about Antonio Williams, 9.6%. That's scary. 17.4% drop rate. So like that was a scary number this year. It did come down a lot. So feeling a lot better about that with Brazel, but did want to note that, especially with these types of speed, like I can't help but think about Marquez Valdez-Scantling sometimes when you think about these types of receivers and where there's drops history. And then nothing special after the catch. He can fall forward, but he also doesn't have the weight of a Malachi Fields, the Elijah Seratt, where like it's kind of a given. He's going to fall for 3 to 4 yards forward. Sometimes Brazel gets stuck up, or stood up, really, I should say. So that kind of brings us to our main conversation here with Chris Brazel. I'm bullish on the upside, and I think especially like, look, I know modern college, like in a lot of ways, I think there's probably less the student athlete life nowadays than like what there was. But also, I don't know, like there's a lot of eyes on them too. So like, I don't know. And I like how many classes did Eric Dickerson really go to at SMU? Like I'd be curious, So, but that being said, like at the next level with Chris Brazel being solely focused on being a professional football player, could we get him up to 210 to 212? And the reason I use that mark is because I see a lot of Martavis Bryant, this guy. Martavis Bryant was 6'3", 211. So 6'4", 198. When you watch Brazel, I think that's who you want him to be. And I know Martavis Bryant with like the drug suspensions, like it wasn't like this elite 10-year all-pro career or anything like that. But the highs of Martavis Bryant, that's a damn good football player. Right? Like he's getting training camp invites to this day because like there's still something in there, like a talented dude. And now we're just a little bit past his prime. But if we could get Brazel up, I mean, 208 could work. So like 10 pounds minimum, but like ideally 210, 212. Then I think he has the play weight to play this way. That like you want this guy running vertical routes, working the sideline, winning 50-50 balls against corners. But right now you get a big enough breeze and it could knock him off his route. And I'm being mostly funny when I say that, but like it's like any sort of contact, specifically as he's going up in the air, you start getting iffy about him coming down with the ball. So that's only going to get tougher on Sundays. Like you're only going to have more physical, more skilled corners at the next level who know how to get their hands into your chest right at the right moment when the ref really fully can't see it. And you're going to have to just battle through that. Happens all the time. So we might take a year. It might take a year to be completely honest. Like year one might just be like, this guy's going to run wind sprints for us basically. But by year two, could this guy be 208 to 212? And if so, I think we've got a really solid, like he could be receiver 2 for you. And I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever, especially if you're a team, like, again, I keep using the Jets where you have Garrett Wilson, who's a great intermediate underneath guy who can also stretch the field, but like those spheres, then plus Chris Brazel is a deep route runner. I'm not looking to quit on Adonai Mitchell either, but like, I'm just saying on paper, like that's the 1-2 punch you want to see. Let's get on to Germie Bernard then, wide receiver 8. And like Bernard, if you've been around the channel, like you already kind of know what I'm going to say here. He's just like the ultimate complement number 2. So in a lot of ways, I think Hurst and Brazel have a higher ceiling, but Bernard's floor is hard to ignore. So 6'1", 206. Let me kind of start with the negatives here. I don't really see 4.48 speed when I watch him. Like if you asked me, I would have said 4.52 to 4.55, to be completely honest with you. Some of it's the routes he runs. Like I don't know if he has a whole lot of like time to build up that speed. And then they use him as a gadget thing. So he's in the backfield, bubble screen, boom. Now he's not building up speed. He's just caught the ball at the line of scrimmage and he's looking to make a dude miss / read out his blocks. So like you're not going to always get to see 4.48 speed fully put on display there. But that being said, it is good to see that he has that because maybe at the next level we get to see a different route tree. We do get to see a little bit more of that speed. He's got to get better against press. Absolutely. And I I understand where a lot of people are looking at him as like he is going to be at the next level a Z or a slot. And I get that. Specifically with him when you get on the next point, not a great catch radius. 23rd percentile wingspan, 13th percentile arm length at 30 and 3/8 inches. So that arm length and wingspan is like one, not conducive to like battling through press. So like I understand where he struggles with that. But I almost do look at him, and I had to pull up Rashad Bateman real quick on Mock Draftable. But like I see the way he plays, I see a lot of Rashad Bateman. The thing is, here we go. Similar wingspans. Wingspan for Bateman, 76.5 inches. For Bernard, it's shorter, 74 1/8, but like somewhat comparable. Nowhere near close is the arm length. Bateman, 33-inch arms. And again, going back to Bernard, 30 and 3/8. So that's where like Bateman can play X. He's not great at it. And he's not the heaviest, most physical, well-built X receiver, kind of like when I'm talking about I want Bradsell to add more muscle to his frame so he can do more of that. Like Bateman doesn't have that, but he has the arm like to like hand fight at the line of scrimmage. So like Bernard, a little heavier at 206, but the arm length is like, I don't know if you can fully do that. And I will say like Bateman, let me double check. What did he come 190 at the combine? I would say his playing weight's probably a little bit heavier than that. But I could be wrong. But I would be willing to say it's probably like 194, somewhere in that ballpark. You also lose weight as the course of the season goes on. Anyways, we're not here to talk about Rashad Bateman. But like, I kind of want that deployment for Bernard, where Bateman really could be an X, a Z, or a slot, and you can live with that. Bernard and that arm length, I'm kind of concerned that maybe, and I've been saying the same thing this whole cycle, but I worry about that arm length. Can he actually play X? He's heavier, though, so I do wonder. And let's be completely honest, if you're playing him at X, I don't think it's ideal, but if you're I keep using the Giants here, but like if you draft him at 37 and you're the Giants, I think in a world where you have Malik Neighbors as an awesome Z slot guy, you could play Bernard as an X because you're kind of sacrificing him to the Wolves. So that way you can keep Neighbors as an X or a Z. As a Z or a slot. So that's kind of my line. I think it's probably not ideal, but I think you could play him at all three spots. But honestly, with that arm length and just overall catch radius too, that's the other side of this. Like, think about how like the Ravens, another team we talked about a lot. Like DeAndre Hopkins isn't who he was 5 to 8 years ago, but like think about the grabs he did make for the Ravens last year. And we talked about Malachi Fields and this huge catch radius, how he can catch these off-frame targets. That wingspan for Bernard's can make that tough. And you kind of want that skill set out of your X receiver. So both the press stuff, but also like being able to like snatch a ball off his frame might not make Bernard the X kind of I could play all three spots type of guy that I thought he was. So he might be a Z slot only at the next level, but I'm still interested to see if he's able to do it. The other thing, again, kind of going back to the X skill set limitations here, the catch radius, 37.7% contested catch rate. Almost every other guy here, even if it was a disappointing year for contested catch rate, they were at like 45% or higher. So 35.7, I mean, like that is oof. And he had the crazy over the body catch against Oklahoma in the college football playoff, but like that's the one grab where you can kind of look at it and we're like, whoa, that was sick ball tracking and like the grip strength was there to reel it in. So because of all that, I kind of am looking at this guy as like a Z slot now, but I do wonder if there's potential and like if there's a team that's just like, yeah, sacrificial X from time to time. But that being said, really smooth route runner, had the best recone of any of the wide receivers at the combine. So like you absolutely see the ability to sink his hips, a little bit of lateral juice where, I kind of question the 4.4, 840 and the linear explosiveness. I can see where there's that change of direction shiftiness in his game, and you see that in his route running ability. Finds the soft spots in zone. Again, I've kind of described him as this Juju Smith-Schuster type where he just does a lot of little things really well. Alignment versatility, I'm going to stand by that X, Z, and slot, but I think at this point, like the X is definitely like if you're doing it, it's to sacrifice him to the Wolves and to keep your better receiver, your superstar, your Garrett Wilson, your Malik Neighbors, these guys we've talked, your Zay Flowers for the Ravens, to keep these guys off of the line of scrimmage and away from press coverage. And then he has a good run blocker. And that's where, like, you could play him at X. Like, I think he could do it. And at 6'1", 206, not great arm length, but he's got the physicality and the want to as a blocker to where I think you could make it work. So the ultimate compliment, I don't think the ceiling is super high for Bernard, not nearly as high as I think it is for Bradsell or Hurst. And you can even see that as I stack these guys up. Like, Seratt, high floor guy. Thompson, higher ceiling, but the floor is definitely lower than Seratt. Stribling, I feel like a relatively high floor. Bell, same thing. Antonio Williams, same thing. And then you like Fields, high floor guy, and then a couple of these guys where like the floor may bottom out with Hurst and Bradsell, but like the ceiling's undeniably higher. And then you get to Germie Bernard. So sometimes I go through my rankings and you'll kind of see that stack. And you even kind of see what the next two guys we're going to talk about here. Chris Bell. So now we're into my first round grades. He'll go into the top of the second, but like to me, that's injury discount. I love me some Chris Bell. Body type and physicality that's like AJ Brown-esque. He's definitely not there like an AJ Brown, but like has the physicality, the muscle, and the yards after the catch stuff that makes you think, ooh, could he be shades of A.J. Brown? So explosive athlete, and it definitely shows after the catch. A majority of what Louisville asked him to do this year before the ACL injury was shallow cross. Kind of like the Malik Neighbors experience year one in New York, where Brian Daboll was like, shallow cross, put this man on the drag, let him carry our team to a first down, please. Or like an explosive touchdown, please, 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 please. What's the easiest way we could get this guy the ball? Drag route, and like you see a ton of that shallow cross, drag route, Chris Bell. So even that kind of tells you like where Louisville sees this guy as like the dude of that offense this year. Ideal frame to play on the outside, 6'1", 222, and absolutely muscled up. This is not 222 of fat. This is 222 of muscle. And you see it on those 50-50 opportunities. Like he is going to go battle through contact where like Brazel, strong wind, he'll get knocked off his route. Bell, he's going to have that, cornerback timely get his hands into his chest, and you're not even going to notice it. It's going to be just a little chink off the armor, basically. Gradual increase in production year over year, just like I like seeing guys go from small school to bigger school, and their level of their level of play goes up with it. You obviously like to see guys who get better and more productive year over year. And I think there's solid ball tracking and hand-eye coordination. Another one of these guys where like the off-body stuff, whether it's a little bit low, a little off his hip, a little high and wide, I think he sees the ball and tracks the football pretty well. The drawbacks coming off a knee injury in November. What I'll say to that is we're seeing players come off of ACL injuries better and better than ever before. And we've been saying that the last 5 years. Like each of the last 5 years, we've been able to say that. And it's only getting more and more true. And also I've heard timeline-wise, he's going to be able to go in training camp. So this could be a guy who plays week one. When we weren't entirely sure that was going to be the case, it seems like it is the case. The route running is the biggest thing. And again, like they run shallow cross a ton because a drag route, like next to no nuance. Like get off the line of scrimmage and you're a couple yards in front of the line of scrimmage and then just like be ready to catch the football and then turn and run. Like you want this guy to play the X receiver spot, and like he can run dagger routes, and he makes himself a very big friendly target. But the thing about it is he has tells. On comeback routes, he'll sink his shoulders and then pop back up. And on dagger concepts, he's standing almost straight up. So like he's got a little bit of these tells where if I can watch it on tape, cornerbacks watching tape are also going to see this. So he's got a couple of body tells, and that just comes down to like Louisville coaching and then like a little bit more opportunity, I think at the next level. So better coaching presented to him at the next level, not having to be a student athlete, just getting to solely be a professional football player. And then like coming off the injury, he's going to have to put in the work too. But there's nothing in his athletic profile that makes me think, oh, this guy can't improve his route running. It really is just like attention to detail. That's going to be the key for getting him there at the next level, and time, attention to detail and time. And then needs to get better against press. Because again, you want this guy to play outside X receiver. And right now his press package is, I'm 222. Want to see me run through your chest? Okay. And like, that's kind of basically all it is. So like if we could add some more nuance, some shoulder fakes, fake the inside, right? Or like even adding an inside release, like for how he plays and where DBs are going to be so concerned about him. Okay. He's going to go outside and he's going to try to work the boundary and he's going to try to get me on the vertical. If he can have an inside release, I think especially within the first year or two, like he's going to catch DBs off guard with that. And he's going to have some instant wins right off the line of scrimmage, and he's going to have some nice yards after catch opportunities. So I'm in on Chris Bell. There's nothing about him and honestly the year over year progression that makes me think he can't take these next steps forward. So I'm a big Chris Bell guy. I would take him late one, right? Like if the Broncos still had the 30th pick and they love Chris Bell, you're not getting an F from me, not even close. But ultimately he's going to go top of the second round. So the Saints at 42, if they haven't gone receiver, I mean, reunite him with Tyler Shuck, home run fit. The Dolphins could make some sense. They're not looking to win games anyways this year, so those teams kind of in the 40s where I've kind of mentioned a few guys, again, the Falcons, that would be a lot of fun. A lot of those teams there in the 40s, I think makes sense. All right, Denzel Boston. So we're like Bell, I think has a higher ceiling than Boston. I could see a world where like Bell, maybe the injury or the route running never comes along. And Boston's floor is pretty high. And friend of the show, Dalton Wasserman, who we just had on for a podcast or for a mock draft collab, he's been through this entire season. Jaden Higgins. So if you like Jaden Higgins coming out of Iowa State last year, I think there's a lot of similarities for Denzel Boston. As of recording, we don't have a 40 time. I don't think he ran one at his pro day at Washington. I think that's fine. Ultimately, I think the build-up speed, the 10-yard split would be, I think, a little bit better than Malachi Fields, but probably ballpark there. It probably starts with a 1.6. Let's just start there. But the 40, I think he could have gotten to like 4.54 to 4.58. And honestly, at 6'3", I'm fine with that. And again, with his body control and his ability to go attack the football and his catch radius, I'm fine with that. I'm totally content. And also another one of these things, he's a guy, smart football player. His ability to stack DBs is pretty impressive in most instances. We'll come back to that in just a little bit. But big body, huge catch radius, like 80th plus percentile when it comes to wingspan, arm length, all that stuff. So like absolutely checks the boxes for an X receiver. And he attacks the football, both in the air and when working back the football. So He's not this insane like athlete, like, oh, scramble drill, Damon Williams is looking for help, but he is super QB friendly when it comes to like working back to the football. Okay, I'm going to throw it along the sideline. He's got that wide catch radius to be able to go extend, make that grab, whether it's, over the sideline, he's extending beyond the sideline to make the grab, kind of Chris Carter style, or it's just in general working back to the football and making himself a more presentable target to the quarterback. He makes it easy on those scramble drills in that instance to find him the football. But he's not like Tyreek Hill where it's like, okay, we're playing backyard football. My guy's way more explosive and athletic than your guy is. But love that. But he also attacks football really well. And a lot of it's 50-50 balls. So like attacking at the highest point isn't necessarily a thing, because like think about the trajectory of a football on a 50, 60 yard throw. But that being said, he times his jumps well and he goes and attacks the football at the right moment too. So he's got a lot of those instincts in his bag. Shows nice ball tracking down the field too. So on a similar note, like his eyes, like he sees it really, really well. And then build up speed on the vertical plane. Again, I don't think the 10-yard split would be anything sexy here, but again, 212 pounds, it's kind of hard to have great build up speed, immediate explosiveness off the line of scrimmage. But I do think by like his flying 20, I wouldn't be shocked if it ended up being like one of the best ones had he run at the combine. And then we get to the drawbacks here. Solid speed, not great, but I think you're totally fine with that for 6'3", 212 and understanding who he is. He's not, and that's where like, could he be a 1B? In theory, yes. But like he's still a number 2 to a team. You still want to have an absolute stud, a lights out, top notch guy. And then ideally him kind of playing off of that. Then we get to fluid mover in and out of breaks, but I wouldn't necessarily say explosive. So kind of what we said about Seratt, same thing about Jacoby Lane. Now I will say Boston, I think there's more explosiveness than those two guys. But it's still one of these things where like he plants his foot on a dagger route and it's not like, oh my God, now he's got 4 yards of separation. How did he do that? And really in kind of like dagger routes, intermediate routes, I would go as far to say that like the longer the route goes on, the less open he is. So that's a bit of a bummer. But that being said, I think you gotta that comes with the territory. Michael Pittman Jr. were kind of the same thing too. And I think Boston's a little bit bigger, but like Pittman, sometimes you'll even see it through like dagger routes from the Colts. And some of it's just the quarterback play too he's had where he's kind of having to wait for the football to come to him. But there are times where, and I think honestly Pittman's probably a little bit more of a little bit more explosive. I'd have to go double check his combine numbers to say that off the top. But you'll see where like dagger route, the DB gets back into the play basically. And yeah, even looking at Michael Pittman, 4'5", 240, Boston probably in the same ballpark. No 10-yard split here. Pretty good short shuttle. 51st percentile, 3-cone, 6.96. Wouldn't be terribly surprising if Boston was like a 7.05, 3-cone, so kind of in that same range. But really, it's more about first step explosiveness. So like, I'm kind of surprised not to see a 10-yard split number in there for Pittman. But we're not here to talk about Michael Pittman now, Pittsburgh Steeler. But Boston is one of those guys for like the intermediate routes. I wish there was a little bit more sustained speed out of the break or just initial explosiveness to where he gets that separation. But he's 6'3" and has a big catch radius, so he can get away with it. So it's not the end all be all. So I think we're talking about a guy who at like 24 to the Browns, the Chiefs with their second first round pick. These teams who are looking for a guy who could be a 1B to a 2, and we're like the Chiefs are kind of the example. Like Rashee Rice, when he's not getting into criminal trouble, is a number 1 wide receiver. But he's a slot only. So like Boston could be that 1B to a really good 2, but he doesn't on the outside. So like that's the situational comp here that I'm looking for Denzel Boston. And I mean like Cleveland, if he goes at 24 to Cleveland, he would be their number 1 guy. So like you can live with that. It's not necessarily ideal, but it would probably then soon follow with them taking another receiver either this year or next year to be the 1A or 1B off of Boston. So really nice complimentary guy, but I think one of the complimentary guys that's good enough to go round 1. Same thing with Omar Cooper Jr. I don't know if he'll ever be a 1 for a team, but like, God, if he's your 2, you're loving life. Kind of like the T. Higgins situation where like, dude, that's our number 2. Oh, let's go. Or Waddle, when things were really kind of working out there for Mike McDaniel in Miami. But anyways, and I'll be completely honest, I went back and forth between him and Casey Concepcion, who we'll talk about at 4. I like them both, and they're next to each other on my big board. Cooper is 18, Casey Concepcion 17. So I love both these guys. And ultimately, that's kind of where like I can't wait to do the big board episode, because sometimes position rankings like edge and receiver this year, they don't give you a great snapshot of how much I love these players. The next 5 guys are all in the top 18 of my board. I have 5 receivers in the top 18, and Boston here, let me double check. Boston is not like all that far behind. Boston on my big board at this current present moment is player number 25. So 6 receivers in the top 25. Also not something that happens all that often. But getting into the good of Omar Cooper Jr., 5'10", 188 pounds, senior, and a little bit of a different route than another senior in Elijah Seratt. He was at Indiana this entire time. So let's kind of talk about that program loyalty. That's one of the weirder pros I have for anybody here. But he was at Indiana for like 2 of that 3-year stretch where they only won 3 games each year. They won 9 games in like a 3-year span, and he was there for the last 2. And then, of course, Curt Cignetti comes. He stays. They win 10 games with Curtis Rourke. And then, of course, this year, his breakout. He's kind of put himself into the first-round radar, and obviously an insane season. So I kind of love that loyalty, to be completely honest with you. Like, in this day and age where, like, NIL, you can be a mercenary, go get your bag. I'm cool with guys getting their bag, but at the same time, that's a mature decision maker. Like, that's a mature move, kind of like Ty Simpson sitting as a 5-star, sitting for 3 years to eventually become a starter. Dante Moore transferring from UCLA to be a backup at Oregon to eventually become a starter. Like, and you know, Dante's not in this class, Ty's a different position group, but sometimes you see these decision-making choices for like someone in their 20s, and you're like, I respect the shit out of that. Like, I love where your head's at. So did want to note that here for Omar Cooper Jr., because I do think that speaks to his character. But an explosive route runner paired with nice long speed, 4.40 at the combine, fantastic body control, evident by the game winner against Penn State, like completely goes numb in the bottom and the lower half, and then gets those 2 feet down. Unreal play there. Gets open against zone coverage, and then also a guy that yards after the catch, like him and Casey Concepcion are probably the 2 best yards after the catch guys. Like, who am I most scared of as a potential tackler about sizing up in space? Omar Cooper Jr. and Casey Concepcion, bar none. And then again, the program loyalty there. So love the person, love the route running ability, love the yards after the catch stuff. Not going to be an X receiver, so like that's the beginning of the drawbacks. He's not like an X. But I do think he could be your number 1 volume guy, kind of like Puka Nacua, and Puka plays inside and out, but like Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Lions. I think there's a world where Cooper Jr. could do that, but he's still going to have that sacrificial X somewhere on that roster, that Romeo Doubs-esque, Malachi Fields-esque type of player. But love how this guy gets open, easy offense after the catch, just not going to be an X receiver. And he doesn't have a great catch radius, to be completely honest with you. That is one of the big limitations here. But that being said, he gets open so much so that I'm not like terribly worried about it. But we're talking about 69th percentile hand size. That's good. But 30 and a quarter arm length, that's 11th percentile. And then wingspan, that's 75th and a quarter, 36th percentile. So like not the biggest catch radius. That being said, I think it works well enough because he is a guy who just naturally gets open with the best of them and has great body control and can adjust the football really, really well. So guy who gets open is easy to generate yards of the catch offense for, and he'll make up for the limitations and like not having a great catch radius. Then we get to Casey Concepcion, man, and like I love both these guys. Again, 17 and 18 on my big board respectively. Fantastic speed, lateral agility, stop-start skills. Like from an overall movement perspective, Casey Concepcion is special. He's got the vertical speed. He's got the explosiveness out of his breaks. He's got the shiftiness with the ball in his hands, lateral movement-wise, and the stop-start where like I always use this example. Like you've seen the Lamar Jackson high school highlight where he just pumps the brakes on that kid in high school and then he goes flying out of the frame. And then Lamar steps in. Like Casey's got that stop-start ability on top of everything else. So like twitchy overall athlete, explosive out of his routes, like I said. And NC State, he was kind of a slot gadget player, and specifically like the routes he ran, like it was just like gimmicky offense because NC State wasn't good, and they knew clearing away Casey Concepcion's our biggest threat. How can we most easily get him the football? So a lot of it's kind of gimmicky at NC State. At A&M, and I don't think Marcel Reed's all world or anything like that, but like that step up in quarterback play, Marcel Reed versus Grayson McCall and the likes of that before at NC State was everything Casey Concepcion needed, plus being asked to like run like a little bit more of a true NFL route tree, showcase, hey, I'm ready for Sundays. I can adjust to a football, whether it's on my target or not. I can go track the ball deep down the field with my vertical speed, and I can run a true, more realistic NFL route tree versus just like end arounds and bubble screens and, you know, all that sort of stuff that he was running at NC State. So this was the opportunity to see Casey Concepcion in a light that translates to Sundays. Like I said, terrific satellite player, and he does bring special teams value. His movement skills, I want him returning punts, returning kicks as much as humanly possible. Not as much, but like absolutely want that threat to be respected on special teams. Drawbacks, 7 drops each of the last 2 years, and he's a clap catcher. So he's trying to time up the ball coming to him, and boom, it's just too much of that. That being said, I've always been a guy that getting open is the harder skill. We can get him on the jugs machine and we can get him comfortable. And frankly, it's just like he doesn't have the world's biggest hands, but like just getting him comfortable, just living with his hands together, I think will go a long way versus trying to time it up and clap it like that. Because ultimately, the ball is going to be coming at him harder on Sundays, or coming at him hotter on Sundays, I should say, a little bit friendlier terminology. But so like the clap catching could get him into trouble real quick, and we might have like a Jerry Jeudy type situation here. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I like the football player, and I saw a big step up in his play from NC State to A&M. So as the level of competition goes up, he's shown me no reason not to buy into him taking that next step forward. And he's not an X receiver. He's 5'11", 196, but 65% of his snaps did come on the outside. So Z slot, Luther Burden usage through and through here for Casey Concepcion. And then we get to the big three, and we're over an hour here. So frankly, at this point, you guys have heard me talk about all these guys a ton. So I'm gonna be pretty quick here. 6'2", 203 pounds for Jordan Tyson. Really, the only reason he's not number one is because of 17 missed games over the last 3 years. That's somewhere between like 35 and 40% of his games missed. And it's all a variety of things. It's a knee, then it's a collarbone injury, then it's a hamstring this last year. And the hamstring thing kind of like comes back up. He doesn't end up doing anything at the combine, even though it kind of felt like maybe he would. Kind of seems like he re-aggravated that injury. You don't like to see soft tissue injuries kind of nagging. And that's been the case so far with Jordan Tyson. But if this guy had only missed one game in his college career, he's a top 5 pick, lock in. Like, he doesn't get past the Titans at 4, and he definitely doesn't get past the Giants at 5. Like, I'd be pretty firm in saying he doesn't get past the Titans at 4, because if they're willing to take Love there, Jordan Tyson only missing one game in college, like if that was his profile, and considering Calvin Ridley's on that roster, and you can still cut him and save a lot of money post June 1st, you would draft Tyson to replace Calvin Ridley day one and give your former number 1 overall pick quarterback a clear-cut number 1 target. He'd be the pick at 4. Maybe even, honestly, he might be the pick at 2, to be completely honest with you. He'd be the pick at 2 for the Jets. So like that's if Jordan Tyson only had one game missed. But that's not the world we live in. So I think, honestly, the Rams at 13, the Ravens at 14, those are the two teams that make the most sense to me. Because, again, if he only has one game missed in his college career, he goes 4 overall. And at the worst, he goes 5 overall to the Giants. But that being said, like, NFL injuries are an equal opportunity, employer at the next level. Like, injuries will come to people who have had extensive injury history, and they'll come after guys who have had no trace of injury history. And then it just happens, and, it is what it is. So, the Rams trying to go all in could use a future, receiver to replace Devontae Adams. I pulled the trigger on Tyson at 13. The Ravens, you almost didn't have the 14th overall pick. You've been looking for this X receiver, boundary guy, so you can move Zay Flowers full-time into the inside, move Bateman full-time to the Z. This is the guy that lets you do that. And you almost didn't have that pick. So, like, those are the two. Like, I really don't see Tyson getting past 14, to be completely honest with you. 16 at the hard floor there to the Jets. I don't think the Jets would pass on the second time. But, like, that's kind of what we're talking about. Because the on-field stuff is the best receiver in this class. He's the best route runner, especially in that 10 to 19-yard range. Has elite deceleration. I think he runs a good vertical. He has good speed, but his ability to decelerate is Justin Jefferson-like. And I take that. Like, I don't think that is hyperbole. Like, legitimately, the deceleration that JJ has and why he's such a good intermediate route runner, Tyson brings that to the table. He plays with enough speed to stretch the field, and he has great football IQ, can stack DBs and win those 50-50 balls when the ball's in the air. Cleaned up the drops, and he's another guy where it's just concentration drops. He's getting so much volume in 24-25 that 8.5% drop rate this year goes down to 1.6% this past season. Just cleaned it up. Just kept eyes on the football, didn't try to turn and run too early. So it's just the injuries. That's the only thing keeping Tyson here at 3. If he only missed one game, he's an easy top 4 to top 5 pick in this year's class. Wide receiver 2, Carnell Tate. And I've kind of landed on like T. Higgins. I think Higgins was a little heavier than 192, but like he's kind of T. Higgins to me. And Higgins ran a 4.55 at his pro day. So let's call it a 4.58, adjusting for pro day speed. I'm T. Higgins here for Carnell Tate. 6'2", 192, excels on the vertical plane, both with like how he just eats up stride, 4.54, that to me sounds about right for speed, but he does it with his long ass strides. He just eats up space. And he has, especially another one of these guys that like kind of like Ted Hurst, but even more nuanced. Carnell Tate with the head and shoulder fakes when you're 15, 20 yards down the field. He shakes it. You will watch tape and be like, what happened? Why did DB do that? It's almost like you're watching like Weapons or something like that. And like the new spell must have been cast. Where's the DB going? Like, holy cow, well, they're running away from Carnell Tate now. And he's just wide open. So love the head and shoulder fakes on those, vertical stems. Off of that, terrific comeback routes. Another one of these guys who's going to win vertically, but he's got to have those comeback and curls and hitches to keep a DB honest. So you can't just fully sell out on the vertical stuff. And with his catch radius, long arms, you kind of saw week 1 against Texas. He's running a comeback against Malik Muhammad and literally extends beyond the sideline on the right sideline there. Nice friendly target. And it's the vertical stuff plus that type of comeback player. The ability of a player to run those types of comeback routes, that's like, okay, cool. This is your perfect X boundary possession receiver, plus the vertical stuff to stretch the field too. So that's where like versus Malachi Fields, like Fields to me is just like big body, physical, contested catch guy who can get down the field a little bit. Tate to me is like the ultimate version of that. Like, and I know 4.54 doesn't say that, but like this guy can win on the vertical plays. Again, he stacks DBs at a high level and has enough speed to get down the field. And then those head and shoulder fakes to create some lead separation and the comeback routes to keep people honest. And then I think he's got a good feel for zone coverage. I think that was true last year. And let me be completely honest here. Cardinal Tate, I think, was my summer receiver 7. Liked him, but I'll steal this from James Foster, another member of the Daps and Draft podcast. But during the summer, like you watch him in 24-25, those comeback routes, like those love of the game routes, he ran them like he hated the game and he hated his life. This year, I don't know if it's just, hey, Emeka Egbuka's gone, so now it's me and Jeremiah, it's our show, but he was dialed in. And the attention to detail and his footwork, it can still get a little better, but like the attention to detail on those types of routes, those love of the game routes, that's what made it all come together for Cardinal Tate this year. Speed is good, not great. But for 6'2", 192, I'm totally content with it. And then he could be a better blocker. And I think part of that is like, could we get this guy to 200 just so he can lock on and sustain those blocks a little bit longer? That would be great. Can we just fill out those arms a little bit more? Ultimately, he's awesome on the vertical plane, but he gets open to where the next level where some of those DBs aren't going to fall for those. I think an extra 8 pounds of muscle would go a long way just to maintain that level of being able to fight through physical play. And then my receiver 1, I've been saying this for a while now, is Makai Lemon. I just think of these receivers, who am I drafting first? It's Makai. 5'11", 192. I personally think he could be a Z slot. I know some people see him as slot only, but to me, I think there's a usage there as a Z. Specifically, if you can get him in motion at the snap. Because I understand wingspan 16th percentile, arm length also 16th percentile. I understand. Like, you want to keep him away from press coverage at all possible, but like, again, Mike McDaniel and how he gets guys in the motion at snap as the Z. Like, I think that could totally work here for Makai Lemon. Ben Johnson does some of the same stuff. So, like, I think there's a way to deploy him on the outside just as much as you can use him as a high volume target in the slot. He's never tackled where he catches a pass. I love it's from Dane Brugler. I love that description for him. And it's one of those things where you hear it and you're like, okay, that's cool. But like, legitimately, when you watch his tape, that statement rings so true because he will make moves and he will make guys miss, both with like, get off me, but also like lateral quicks, shifts, jump cut, things like that you're like, Jesus, dude, like, why do you make this look so easy? How can you make so many humans miss who are good football players? Like, it's just so fascinating. Plays way bigger than his size. And he's also one of the, like the catch radius, I would have thought it was like 35th to 40th percentile, to be completely honest with you. I didn't see 16th percentile because he plays so much bigger than that. And also, I have bigger hands than Makai Lemon, which like I take great appreciation in. I have 9-inch hands. He's got 8 3/4, which is 9th percentile, which makes no sense because you watch how he plays the game and the grabs he makes on the sideline. Tough grabs over the middle, getting clobbered by safeties. He might be the best red zone player, and I have it right here, thrives in the red zone. He might be the best sub 6 foot player I've seen in the red zone since starting doing this in 2018. It's unreal. So like the hand size, the arm length, like none of it makes sense because I watched this guy play and he excels way above all of that. Smart, savvy route runner, and that's part of how he can do and get away with that. He's just constantly open. He is kind of this Amon-Ra St. Brown situational thing where it's just like, and Amon-Ra obviously has a bigger wingspan and everything, but like he's just open. So none of the other stuff really matters because he's just open. And even when he does like 192, Amon-Ra, let me see how much he weighed at the combine. Amon-Ra, if I remember right, he wasn't like that much heavier than this. Yeah, 197. So 5 pounds heavier than this. And think about that. Like, think about Amon-Ra Brown. Does he look like 197 when he plays on Sundays? He's probably added a little bit of weight, but like plays so much bigger and more physical than that. And I don't know if it's just like he's got so much density in his frame and it's evenly distributed so he can play bigger than 192. But like, I said the same thing about Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy who could play inside and out, plays bigger than 197. And the same is true here for Makai Lemon. Not that we always want to go, like for like comps. And look, I don't know, he doesn't have like the perfect size for it, but like he's a willing blocker. Like he'll put his effort forth. He'll put his nose in that. And I think that's just all the easier to make it to draft this guy. The drawbacks, he's 5'11", 192, so he's not an X. And he does struggle with press coverage. Everyone's talking about the Leonard Moore Notre Dame game, and Leonard Moore follows him into the slot and still presses him. I understand that stuff can still follow you into the Z or in the slot, but at least you're not on the line of scrimmage. You give yourself a little bit of wiggle room to get some build-up speed, put a couple moves together, and get away from press coverage. And I think that's just like, I look at how refined and technical his game is, and I would be floored if at the next level he doesn't add more nuance to his release package. That would be just so counterintuitive to everything else that his game is. Refined, nuanced, just has all the details together. Like if he doesn't get better against press, like that would be so bizarre to me. And then doesn't have elite top end speed. But he makes it work. He makes it work. And you kind of even see it in like the Notre Dame game, right? Like, or not even the Notre Dame game, the Notre Dame game a year ago, where he has this, big catch, breaks away, but then, 30 yards on the field, he's getting hawked, so he has some of that, no doubt about it. But he also has breakaway touchdowns against Illinois, right? Like, sometimes he does break away from the defense, but it is more like good speed than great. But Mekhi Lemon, if there's any receiver I'm drafting, if there's not one off the board, Mekhi Lemon's where my list personally starts. But guys, I'd love to hear your wide receiver rankings. I threw 22 names at you today. Let me hear whatever your list is. You want to give me top 5, top 10? You want to be crazy? Give me top 22? Let me see you be crazy. Give me top 22 names down below in the comment section. I'd love to hear your list for this wide receiver rankings. Who do you think I have too high? Who do you think I have too low? I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's video and on this wide receiver class as a whole. Like I said, tons of content on the way. We got team-specific 7-round mock drafts on the horizon, more collab mock drafts coming, more position rankings, and that's just really the tip of the iceberg. And then once we get post-draft, breaking down the draft, grades, favorite fits, favorite value selections, all that sort of fun stuff. So definitely become a subscriber both on YouTube here to 32Beat Writers, but also great time to become a subscriber over at 32beatwriters.com. We just introduced a new tier that's just $2.99 a month for all this information, access to my draft rankings, Z's fantasy rankings, all the tidbits of news we provide. $3 a month. If you're a fantasy football player, man, that's a tough bargain to pass just from where I sit. But I'm done selling to you. I hope you appreciate today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Until next time, my name is TH9, signing off.